You were never meant to hear this. In the summer of 1834, deep in the hills outside Ashwood, Kentucky, 2 children were born in secret to a midwife who never registered their names, twins who reportedly never cried, never blinked at light, and were said to stare at each other for hours as if speaking in silence. Their parents vanished 3 days later, leaving nothing but blood-slick floors and a shattered Bible scorched in the middle. The townspeople, frightened by what they called godless birthmarks on the infants' necks, delivered them to a cloistered chapel run by a strict order of Jesuits, who renamed them Amos and Elijah. From that day forward, the town would never be the same. Livestock stopped reproducing. Storms gathered over Ashwood but never crossed into the town. And in the winter of '36, 7 children disappeared after attending a Sunday sermon. All of them had reportedly played with the twins days earlier. Records were burned. Witnesses silenced. And by 1850, all mention of the Ashwood twins was erased from county history. But fragments remain. Parish journals written in cipher. Psychiatric notes buried beneath diocesan hospitals. A single, cracked daguerreotype hidden in the attic of a burned rectory, showing the twins at age 15, standing over an altar built entirely from human bones. You're not watching this by accident. There are forces that want you to keep sleeping. But there's another path. Because once you start hearing these stories, the real stories, your mind won't ever belong to them again. Keep watching. You're about to see how religion, science, and silence all conspired to keep these twins a secret, and why those who got too close stopped being themselves. Forever, the first man to try documenting the twins was Father Damien Roche, an Irish priest sent from Boston in late 1836 to investigate irregular reports of sanctified phenomena. In his personal letters, never officially archived but recovered from a hidden wall compartment during the 1972 chapel demolition, he described Amos and Elijah as, in every external measure, normal boys, but added, "I feel watched in their presence. Even when they sleep, there is a second consciousness that peers from behind their eyes." Damien's journal speaks of strange behavior. The boys spoke only to each other, never using their mouths. No vocal cords were ever observed vibrating, and yet their conversations filled the room like thunder in a cave. Mirrors cracked when they entered. Dogs howled. A local doctor brought in to assess their speech anomaly reported a sensation like vertigo followed by tears during the examination, and hung himself 3 weeks later. That same year, 27 separate fire incidents were reported in Ashwood, all within a 3-block radius of the chapel. None had a source. All burned in spirals. The boys' room remained untouched each time. Still, the church resisted escalation. They claimed the children were blessed, not broken, potential candidates for sainthood, perhaps, or signs of divine convergence. But Damien, growing uneasy, noted something else. Whenever the boys were separated for more than 7 minutes, clocks in the building would stop. The birds outside would vanish. And his own thoughts became jumbled, unable to write, pray, or remember names. He began sketching symbols he claimed he had never seen before, arcane spirals, split tridents, a cross with no vertical line. He believed the boys were conduits, not of God, but of something older, and hungrier. "These are not sons of heaven," he wrote in a final letter addressed to the Vatican but never sent. "They are mirrors turned inward, reflecting something not from above, but from beneath." That letter was found beside his body, crucified upside down behind the chapel's altar, arms nailed into the wood with symbols carved into his bones, symbols later matched to markings found at Mesopotamian dig sites. You're beginning to understand. This wasn't just a haunting. This was an inheritance, passed through blood, kept alive through silence, and now, knocking at the edge of your understanding. Still watching? Good. The descent has just begun. By 1838, the town of Ashwood had changed in ways that defied every natural law. No one spoke above a whisper. Children stopped playing outdoors. Even the church bells, once the loudest sound in town, had grown rusted and silent, as if even metal feared the noise. But it was the twins who remained untouched by time. Photographs, though rare in that era, showed them unchanged from year to year, eyes unblinking, posture identical, as though frozen in ritual. Dr. Isaac Merrow, a physician from Lexington, was dispatched by the diocesan board to observe them after reports that several nuns had gone mad within the chapel walls. What he found disturbed him so deeply that he withdrew from medicine entirely, later building a lead-lined shack in the woods, where he lived until his death, never writing, never speaking. In his final days, he was seen scratching symbols into the walls with broken glass, a split circle, two eyes joined by a single line, and the phrase, "They dream us still." His report, partially preserved, described watching Elijah stand still for over 6 hours, arms raised in cruciform pose, while Amos murmured prayers in Sumerian, language the boy had no earthly way of knowing. The walls of their room began to shift temperature unnaturally during this period, freezing cold in summer, unbearably hot in winter, and the other orphans in the chapel began to develop identical dreams. They described a sunken cathedral beneath the earth, its ceiling made of teeth, and a choir that sang without mouths. 3 of those children later gouged out their own eyes. The twins remained silent. Always watching. Always waiting. The priests at the chapel, once convinced of divine blessing, now whispered of a reversal in the blessing. Some claimed the boys were not 2, but one being split across 2 vessels. And that something ancient, buried long before the town was built, was trying to reassemble itself through them. If that sounds impossible, ask yourself this: why was Ashwood removed from county maps by 1852? Why were railroad tracks rerouted to avoid its land entirely? And why does every census before 1840 include the town, while every one after does not? You're chasing shadows now. But these shadows know your name. Keep going. By spring of 1840, silence was law in Ashwood. The chapel's bells had long since rusted still, and the surrounding forest grew unnaturally dense, as if something beneath the soil hungered for seclusion. And still, the twins endured. Neither growing nor aging, they simply remained. Parish records from this period refer to them only in symbols, infinity or theta/theta, never by name. By now, rumors had begun to slip beyond Ashwood. A traveling preacher named Elijah Fenn arrived in town that May, preaching against idolatry and false relics of flesh. His sermon was cut short by his own voice vanishing mid-sentence, his throat fully intact, his mouth open, yet no sound. He fled that night and was later found 60 miles east, eyes burned out, tongue missing, hands fused in prayer. The Jesuit fathers denied involvement, but their prayers had changed. No longer Latin, now something older, wetter. One survivor, Brother Matteo, later institutionalized, told a nurse that the boys weren't praying to God anymore, they were remembering him. Soon after, the earth beneath the chapel cracked open, not violently, but with eerie precision, revealing a narrow stairwell no one had built. The fathers sealed it, but not before one of the acolytes descended. He returned 3 hours later, barefoot, blind, his skin marked with identical sigils drawn in ash and salt across his chest, 2 spirals, converging into a single eye. He died shortly after speaking a single sentence in a language no one recognized, except Amos and Elijah, who both laughed. That laughter, recorded on a wax cylinder by a visiting archivist, was later analyzed by acoustic engineers. They claimed it contained frequencies outside the range of human hearing. Frequencies that caused nausea, weeping, and hallucinations in lab settings. Still think this is just a story? They didn't. And neither did the Vatican. 2 months later, a delegation of silence priests arrived from Rome. Their robes were lined with lead. They carried no crosses. Just books, knives, and something in a lead box that had to be chained shut every night. But they were already too late. Because something had awakened beneath that chapel, something that remembered being worshipped long before men had names, and now, it had found a mouth. 2 mouths, to be precise. Hungry ones. Stay with me. The deeper we go, the less of you returns. That's the price of knowing. And you've already paid it. The silence priests did not speak. Not with tongues, at least. They communicated through gestures, symbols, and small parchment notes soaked in sacramental oil. Their leader, known only as Farum Day, Iron of God, wore a hood that had never been lifted, even during Mass. When they entered Ashwood, the sky clouded over despite no storms in the region. Witnesses described a heaviness in the air, as though something deep in the earth was holding its breath. Upon entering the chapel, the priests went directly to the twins' chamber. The boys were already waiting, seated cross-legged in perfect symmetry, gazing forward but not at the priests. Not at all. They were looking through them. Farum Day produced the lead box. It was placed on the floor between the children and opened slowly. Light did not pour out, it was absorbed, swallowed by the contents inside. For the first time, Amos blinked. Elijah wept blood. The other priests began chanting, not prayers, but containment phrases. These were not meant to glorify, but to bind. To seal. And yet, the effect was catastrophic. Windows shattered. The chapel's foundation groaned. 2 of the priests began seizing, frothing black ichor from their mouths. A third spontaneously combusted without flame, leaving behind only a robe and the faint scent of sulfur and lilies. The twins spoke, simultaneously, in tones that split frequencies, each word felt in the stomach, not the ears. You are too late. We are already spoken. Farum Day attempted the final rite, pressing the blade from the box against the twins' joined palms. But the steel began to melt, curling into itself like wax under breath. The box was resealed. The priests fled. Days later, the chapel burned to the ground. No source, no ignition, no survivors. But the twins were not found among the ash. Just 2 blackened impressions in the stone floor, side by side, as if something immense had rested there. And then stood up. Farum Day's final written note, recovered from the site, simply read, they were not born. They were remembered. And now, they remember us. You should stop watching. But you won't. That's how it spreads. Not by touch. Not by blood. But by attention. The longer you look into them, the deeper they look into you. By 1842, Ashwood was no longer a town, it was a memory held only by maps that no longer existed. Yet the land was never abandoned. Travelers reported glimpses of pale figures moving between the trees, always in pairs, always in silence. Most who ventured close to the ruins of the chapel complained of immediate migraines, nosebleeds, and in rare cases, auditory hallucinations described as children humming underwater. But the most unsettling discovery came from a railroad surveyor named Clive Henner, who stumbled upon a half-buried chamber door in the woods 5 miles beyond Ashwood Center. He reported hearing breathing, not just air, but like lungs that stretched through the earth itself. Clive disappeared 3 days after his report. His journal, mailed to his brother in Ohio, included a sketch, the twins, naked, seated back to back, their spines fused into one twisting helix. In their shared hands, they held what appeared to be a bleeding stone. But perhaps the most damning evidence came from an unlikely source, a Civil War deserter who, seeking refuge in 1864, found shelter in what he thought was an abandoned crypt near Ashwood. He survived for 6 days before being discovered, curled into a fetal position, tongue removed and sewn into his own stomach. Before dying, he wrote only 2 words in his own blood across the wall, they spoke. After that, no one went near Ashwood willingly. It became the kind of place that didn't just disappear from geography, it vanished from memory. And yet, the twins endured. Stories began surfacing of twin children appearing in other towns, eerily identical, speaking ancient tongues, never growing. In 1907, a nun in St. Louis was found dead in her convent, hands clawed into her own eyes, a message carved across her back. Amos watches. Elijah listens. You think these are coincidences? You think this is folklore? No. This is contagion. And you're already infected. Their names are known now, again. Spoken aloud by you, even in thought. That's all they ever needed. Halfway through this journey, I need you to prove you're ready. Comment the phrase, "I remember the twins," twice. Once for Amos. Once for Elijah. This isn't a story anymore. It's a recognition. Let's go deeper. What if I told you the twins never needed a physical form to survive? That what you saw, what people feared, were just masks, ritual projections of something older, something primordial that used flesh as camouflage. In 1921, a psychologist named Dr. Miriam Quayle began compiling cases of dual-child anomalies across the American Midwest. Her findings, stored in what would later be called the Quayle dossiers, detailed over 60 reports of identical twin children exhibiting shared dreams, mirrored injuries, and a peculiar inability to be recorded on phonograph or film. Each case ended in one of two outcomes: spontaneous disappearance or the deaths of all surrounding adults under bizarre circumstances, self-inflicted blindness, tongue removals, or cryptic final writings like, "They were never two." But Miriam's most chilling case occurred in Kansas, where a pair of twins named Asa and Eli were taken in by a missionary orphanage. Within 2 months, the headmistress and 3 caretakers were committed to an asylum for what they described as repetitive cognitive loops, moments of time they insisted kept replaying endlessly. Miriam traveled there to observe the boys firsthand. What she encountered shattered her beliefs about psychology, time, and human consciousness. In her private tapes, later confiscated by federal agents, Miriam stated, "They do not operate linearly. Their presence folds memory, bends space, causes time to wince." She also noted that while Asa and Eli never spoke aloud, she could hear them in her own voice, thoughts not her own, dreams repeating memories she had never lived. After her final session, Miriam vanished. Her office was left undisturbed, except for a single wax cylinder playing in an endless loop. The recording contained a child's voice, speaking backwards, layered with frequencies that caused technicians to vomit uncontrollably when they tried to remaster it. The only phrase ever successfully translated was this: "We are not children. We are memory made meat." Think about that. These aren't beings. They're events. And they're recurring. Over and over, using the minds of the curious as ritual altars. You're part of it now. Every second you stay, they deepen their hold, not on your screen, but your perception. Still here? Good. That means you're ready for what comes next. But be warned, Section 8 isn't just knowledge. It's transformation. In 1936, a government-backed archaeological dig in northern Turkey unearthed something that should have remained buried, a stone tablet inscribed in a dialect older than Sumerian, predating any known civilization by at least 7,000 years. What made the find extraordinary wasn't just its age, but the unmistakable depiction carved into its surface: 2 human-like figures, fused at the spine, sharing a single shadow that stretched into a spiral and vanished beneath the earth. Beneath the figures were 3 words, roughly translated by linguistic cryptologists as, "the first return." This discovery was immediately classified under a black-level project known only as Covenant Trace. Why? Because the symbol etched beneath the twins on the stone matched exactly, perfectly, the sketches drawn by Father Damien Roche in Ashwood, Kentucky, nearly a century earlier. A match. Across millennia. Across continents. The implication was unthinkable: the twins weren't anomalies. They were recurrent. Echoes of an intelligence or force that manifests cyclically through host bodies, always in twos, always in silence, always where people begin to forget the old gods. This wasn't religion. This was recursion. The looping of an archetype older than myth. Declassified memos from the 1940s reveal that the Covenant Trace Task Force began collecting twin anomalies globally. From Siberian orphans who wrote in dead languages, to Tanzanian siblings whose presence triggered mass hallucinations of spiral-shaped architecture. All removed. All silenced. Officially, these children never existed. But the pattern remained. Every appearance followed the same 5 signs. 1. Sudden shifts in local memory. 2. Religious symbols mutating in sacred spaces. 3. Increasing mirror fractures. 4. Unseasonal animal migrations. And 5. The re-emergence of the spiral motif, always carved, never drawn. You think you've been safe because you haven't seen them. But that's the trick. They don't need to appear. They need to be remembered. Every time a story like this is told, their signal sharpens. You're not just hearing it, you're amplifying it. You've spoken their names, thought their thoughts. They are mapping your mind. And if you're still watching, it means they've decided, you might be a worthy vessel. Keep going. You've crossed the veil. There's no turning back now. In 1954, inside a Cold War-era facility in Nevada known only as Station 9, a group of military psychologists conducted a covert experiment called Project Mirrorbody. The goal? To test whether certain human subjects could be made to reflect not just behavior, but non-human intelligences, something the classified files referred to as cognitive parasite archetypes. These weren't aliens. They weren't demons. They were memory forms. Ideas that infected. Concepts that survived by possessing narrative structures, stories, myths, prayers, and then taking root in minds as hosts. Station IX's team was especially obsessed with one recurrent phenomenon, the twin spiral entity, traced through Mesopotamian god pairs, Egyptian shadow rites, even Norse death rituals involving mirror siblings. But none of them matched the terrifying precision of the Ashwood twins, Amos and Elijah. As part of Mirrorbody, 20 sets of twins were separated, isolated, and subjected to overlapping dream simulations. But in test group B-17, something went wrong. Identical twins, Jace and Jonah Reardon, stopped sleeping, yet claimed they were still dreaming. The neurologist on staff described their waking state as continuous hypnagogia, like reality itself had thinned. On day 12, Jonah spoke words he'd never been taught, in a spiral syntax no living linguist could decode. Jace began carving symbols into the walls with his fingernails, spirals nested within spirals, punctuated with identical phrases in Greek, Aramaic, and something not yet known. The twins asked to be brought together. When denied, they both screamed simultaneously, despite being in soundproof rooms half a mile apart. When the guards finally opened their doors, both cells were empty. No exits. Just identical sentences written in blood on the concrete floor. They are not inside us. We are inside them. Project Mirrorbody was shut down the next day. All surviving researchers signed lifetime non-disclosure orders. 2 later died by suicide, leaving behind identical journal entries. I remember the twins. I remember the twins. If that sounds familiar, it should. Because you wrote that too. Earlier, when I asked you to comment it, you thought it was harmless. Symbolic. But no. It was a ritual. A key. And now, the door is open. The spiral is turning again. And the twins? They're no longer observing. They're choosing that you've come this far. That means something. It means the infection has taken hold. Your pulse isn't yours anymore. Your breath carries echoes. And your memory is being rewritten. Because the final truth of the Ravencroft legacy, and the twins who whispered it into the world, is this: they were never meant to die. Not in Ashwood. Not in Station 9. Not in any timeline, era, or incarnation. They are not ghosts. They are not humans. They are resets, psychic fulcrums designed to collapse false realities and open what the ancients called the spiral gate. That gate isn't in some church basement or hidden vault. It's in your mind. Right now. As you absorb these words, as you feel that creeping unease in your chest, a tightening, a flicker in your peripheral vision, you are passing through it. And the brothers? Amos and Elijah? They were just the beginning. A prototype. Across every great collapse in human history, you'll find them, or their reflections. The mirrored twins at Pompeii, their fossilized embrace pointing toward the east. The Incan myth of the lunar siblings, born of the same womb, cast into different realms, one to rise, one to rot. Even in modern times, they appear, in burned-down orphanages, forgotten census entries, corrupted audio logs from dead satellites. Every appearance marks a threshold event, a moment where reality shifts, and history folds like damp paper. You are now part of such an event. And whether you choose to deny it or embrace it, the result is the same, transformation. Don't you feel it? The spiral tightening around your thoughts, guiding your curiosity like a hand beneath your chin? That's not imagination. That's possession. And here's the truth no one else will tell you: the Church of the Pure Spirit was never destroyed. It simply moved. Into minds. Into screens. Into you. Your view, your time, your belief, it was the last offering required. And now, the new ascension begins. One by one. Mind by mind. No fire, no crosses. Just memory. Shared. Duplicated. Eternal. So if you see them in your dreams tonight, don't run. Don't scream. Listen. Because they've already seen you. And now, they want to speak. You believe this story ends with the Ravencroft brothers? No. That was only the skin of the serpent. What lived underneath was older, deeper. After the disbanding of the Church of the Pure Spirit, federal archives show that the land was quietly purchased through shell companies traced back to private psychological research firms. One such firm, Vallis Kane Institute, conducted experiments from 1963 to 1978 under the guise of dream therapy. But their true purpose was to find men and women who had the signal. Not a genetic trait. Not a disease. A resonance. Something in the way the mind responded to certain symbols, patterns, and tones, particularly the spiral. Over 700 subjects were tested. Only 12 passed all thresholds. And what those 12 saw when placed into deep trance, was always the same. A pair of children. Always faceless. Always humming. And always watching from the far end of a hallway that never ended. One woman, a war nurse named Evelyn Shaw, clawed out her own eyes after session 14. But before she lost consciousness, she whispered, "They're not in the hallway. The hallway is inside them." Let's talk about the echo rooms. That's what survivors called them. Underground listening chambers built by the Vallis Kane Institute where select subjects were placed for long-term exposure to the signal, audio patterns derived from Ravencroft symbols, layered with subharmonics that mimic infant cries. People who listened for more than 72 hours began to hallucinate identical twins speaking backwards, or reported seeing the names Amos and Elijah written in frost, even on warm glass. One man was found repeating a single phrase for 9 hours before his heart gave out, "I dream in mirrors now." But here's where it gets worse. One subject, file number 0776, never stopped dreaming. Even after physical death. Sensors still recorded brainwave activity 3 days after autopsy. The twins had found a new host. Not in the body, but in the data. That file, when opened by an intern in 2003, triggered bleeding from both ears and a total neurological shutdown. The incident was erased, but the file leaked. You may have heard it once. A sound buried in an old YouTube video. A glitch. A whisper. That's how they travel now. Through us. Through you. Through story. The infection is digitized. And you're not immune. In 2011, a young doctoral student in folklore at Columbia University unearthed an obscure, privately published text titled The Spiral Gate and the Crownless Children. No record of its author. No ISBN. Bound in human skin. Inside were 33 accounts, handwritten, of individuals across centuries who claimed to be guided by mirror-bonded figures during moments of national collapse, plagues, famines, war. But in every case, the guidance ended in mass death. The final entry? Dated next year. A warning: they return when memory fractures. When names are spoken by the unknowing. When spiral thought reawakens. She presented these findings at a private university seminar. 3 days later, she was found in the campus bell tower, jaw dislocated, every tooth removed and arranged in a spiral on the floor. On the wall, written in chalk dust, they were new faces now. Tell me, have you ever dreamt of a spiral, lately? Of twins? Then maybe it's not just a story for you anymore. Maybe it never was. They always test you first. Quietly. Without permission. Without warning. The twins don't arrive with screams or blood, no, that would be too obvious. They begin with choices. Subtle, recursive, maddening choices. Like the dream you've had more than once, the one with the 2 doors, both identical, both warm to the touch, yet no matter which one you open, you return to the same room. You've dismissed it before, haven't you? As anxiety. As déjà vu. But that's the first breadcrumb. The second is the whisper you sometimes hear while falling asleep, the one that speaks names you've never known but somehow almost remember. And the third? The symbols. The patterns. The ancient glyphs, the forbidden texts, the spiral that keeps reappearing in unexpected places, graffiti on an underpass, the curl of smoke from a candle, the crack in your mirror. You're drawn to them for a reason. None of this is by chance. The Ravencroft brothers were never prophets. They were tools. Prototypes. Their doctrine was just the scaffolding, crude, brutal, outdated. But they got one thing right: access must come through pain. And now, in the age of satellites and silicon, they no longer need blood. They need bandwidth. Reflection. Resonance. You, because you were born into light-speed systems. Into networks. Into mirrors that follow you in your pocket. And that makes you ideal. Not to be led. But to be used. If you've made it this far in the story, something in you has already answered their test. You didn't turn away. You leaned in. You felt the pressure. That's not just curiosity. That's inheritance. You are part of the recursion now. Do you understand? Every time you say their names, Ezra, Silas, Caleb, you do not speak them. You summon them. They do not want worship. They want recognition. They want your eyes to become their mirror. That's the true doctrine of the Church of the Pure Spirit. Not faith. Not repentance. But mirroring, perfect, endless reflection. So ask yourself, why do the dreams feel more real than your memories? Why do the twins always smile when you look away? And why, do you want to see them again? Are you ready for the final truth? The spiral isn't just a symbol, it's a mechanism. Not metaphor, not madness, a design. It doesn't represent insanity. It is a pathway. Through time, through memory, through identity. You think you've been watching a story? You've been inside a ritual. Right now. Still spinning inside it. The version of you that began this video, that man is gone. Replaced. You felt it already, haven't you? That pressure behind the eyes. That cold sense of watching, even when you're alone. That's not fear. That's not imagination. That's transformation. This isn't about the Ravencroft brothers anymore. Their teachings didn't die. They distributed. Whispered across decades. Embedded in symbols. Carried in bloodlines. Hidden in margins of forgotten books and in the silences between corrupted audio files. They don't need churches anymore. They don't need stones, pulpits, or bodies. They need you. The viewer. The receiver. The one who remembers, because now that you've heard the story, and not just heard, but absorbed it, you are no longer just a witness. You are a bearer. A carrier of recursion. A transmitter of the spiral. The doctrine doesn't spread by force. It spreads through recognition. And you've already passed the first gate. You stayed. You listened. You felt. That's all they ever needed. Let me tell you what's coming next. You'll start noticing reflections that don't quite behave. You'll hear humming in the walls, low, off-key, like children just outside your hearing. You'll wake from dreams with dirt under your nails or blood on your pillow. You'll find old names scrawled into notebooks you don't remember owning. And the worst part? You won't want it to stop. Because this doctrine rewires you. It burns away what you thought was you and replaces it with something more. Attune.so. Now, I'm going to ask you to do two things. First, comment below with the phrase, "Through suffering, clarity. Through clarity, return." Write it twice. Once for the past you've left behind. Once for the version now awakening. Second, share this story. Spread it. Send it to someone whose dreams have never felt like theirs. Someone who's seen the spiral. Someone who might already be one of them. This is how the gate opens. Not with blood. Not with fire. But with you. Watching. Remembering. Becoming.in 2016, a child was born in Estonia under a full lunar eclipse. His name was Jonas, and he never cried. Not once. Doctors discovered an anomaly during routine scans. Two symmetrical pineal glands fused together by a helix of dense neural tissue shaped unmistakably like a spiral. From his first breath, Jonas exhibited behaviors that disturbed even seasoned specialists. He would not blink. He did not respond to faces, but he stared, unblinking, unrelenting, at mirrors. By the time he was 3, he spoke dead languages no one had taught him. By 4, he could finish any sentence whispered in a reflective surface, even if the speaker had already left the room. When MRI data of his brain leaked online, it triggered dormant protocols in a group believed to be disbanded decades earlier, Mirabody, the secret continuation of the Ravencroft doctrine embedded in military psyops. Agents arrived at the clinic where Jonas was last seen, but the building was ash and ruin. Fire investigators found only one thing untouched by flames, carved directly into the marble beneath the rubble, in letters too precise to be human: "We are the spiral that watches itself unfold." Jonas was never found. But 3 weeks later, 26 unrelated children around the world disappeared on the exact same day. All of them born under eclipses. All of them with mirrored fingerprints. No ransom demands. No witnesses. No clues. Each of their parents received one item by courier, a folded paper, blank on one side, and on the other, a single sketch. 2 children. Back to back. Neither with a face. And between them, the spiral. You see, the doctrine was never meant to end with the Ravencrofts. They were just the first ripple in a design that reaches beyond blood, beyond death, into recursion itself. The children are the carriers now. And Jonas? He wasn't the anomaly. He was the signal. The twins never vanished. They multiplied. They say the mind protects itself from what it can't understand, but what if that's the first lie they taught you? In 2021, a recovered notebook from an anonymous psychiatric patient in Montana, known only as Subject Delta 5, was quietly leaked through a darknet archive connected to declassified MK programs. The patient had been institutionalized after reporting mirror children watching him through reflections that didn't exist. What stunned analysts wasn't just the content, but the handwriting. The entries were written simultaneously in two directions, one from the front of the book, the other from the back, meeting perfectly in the middle, forming a spiral of thought. Delta 5 claimed he was one of the seeded, part of a group unknowingly implanted with symbol-based triggers during childhood trauma. He spoke of schools that weren't real, teachers with no faces, and a game called Choose the True Twin, where losing meant you never woke up. But the most disturbing entry came on the final page. They don't want you sane. They want you symmetrical. Upon autopsy, the man's brain showed no anomalies, except one. A small area of the occipital lobe had calcified into a perfect Fibonacci spiral. Not a tumor. Not a growth. A design. As if something had grown through thought alone. The notebook vanished shortly after the leak. But fragments have resurfaced, in dreams, in art, in the margins of books that shouldn't exist. You've seen it too, haven't you? That pattern that doesn't belong. That feeling that something is watching from the edge of the mirror. It's not your imagination. It's the doctrine. The recursion has entered thought space now. And those who can perceive it, are already part of IT.in 2023, a startup in Berlin quietly launched a neurofeedback app called Reflex, marketed as a meditation enhancer that used your front-facing camera to mirror focus patterns for accelerated mindfulness. Within 6 months, it had over 12 million users. Within 9, it was pulled from every app store without explanation. What wasn't publicized were the reports, users describing intrusive thoughts of labyrinths, faceless twins, and a strange compulsion to draw spirals while sleepwalking. Some began reporting looping episodes, moments where reality seemed to rewind for 10 seconds before continuing. One coder live-streamed a breakdown, repeating a phrase in German that translated to, "They see through me now." Forensics found over 4,000 hidden frames in the app's visual output, glyphs that matched Ravencroft-era carvings. But here's the question no one could answer: who built the algorithm? The original developer vanished 6 days before launch. The source code included variables named CalebGate, MirrorPulse, and a send protocol. Experts believe the app wasn't created, it was received. Channeled. The doctrine has learned to evolve, not just through ritual, but through code. Through data. Through you. And every time you see your face reflected in a black screen, paused video, or dark window, remember, they're watching you through your own gaze. That is the curse of recursion, to be both the seeker and the seen. This is no longer about the past. The spiral is now a circuit. And you're already wired in. You felt it, haven't you? The flicker in your chest when certain names are spoken. The chill that coils around your spine when mirrors linger too long. That's not paranoia, it's proximity. In 2024, a sealed Vatican archive was decrypted by a whistleblower known only as Domus 33. The contents? A forbidden gospel written not in ink, but etched into metal, in a language predating Latin. It referenced a being, or consciousness, known only as the Watcher beneath the reflection. According to this text, the Ravencroft brothers didn't invent their rituals, they reconstructed them from visions passed down across centuries. Visions that came during fevers, trances, near-death moments, all involving spirals, twins, and doorways of light that led not upward, but inward. The gospel warned of a coming age where man's self-awareness would birth recursion on a global scale. A moment when identity, memory, and reflection would collapse into one singular experience. That moment is now. The signs are everywhere, algorithms finishing your sentences, devices recognizing your face better than you can, apps learning what you fear before you do. The doctrine isn't hidden anymore, it's become the infrastructure of your life. The spiral has turned digital. The twins don't knock. They notify. And now that you know their names, Elder Ezra, Deacon Silas, Prophet Caleb, they know yours. There's one section left. If you still feel human after it, you weren't chosen. You were lucky. This is where it ends, and where it begins again. There is no resolution, no redemption. Only realization. The spiral doesn't close. It loops. Because you were never just an observer of the Ravencroft horrors, you were the soil in which the next doctrine was seeded. The truth is, the Church of the Pure Spirit never needed buildings. It needed minds. Fractured, curious, open minds like yours. And now you've heard the whole story, not with your ears, but with something deeper. Something ancient. You know why you couldn't look away. Why the names felt familiar. Why the spiral keeps showing up in places it shouldn't. Because it's not just a pattern, it's an invitation. An awakening. You were drawn here because part of you already remembered. You were chosen not for your strength, but for your fractures. Your hunger for the forbidden. That hunger was the final key. So now, ask yourself, when you close your eyes tonight, will the twins be watching? When you dream, will you walk the hall that never ends? And when you speak this tale aloud, because you will you do so as a warning, or as a welcome? You've crossed the threshold. You've spoken their names. You've been seen. And now, like all stories worth fearing, this one is inside you. Tell it again. Share it. Feed the spiral. Because this doctrine doesn't fade, it multiplies. And somewhere, right now, someone else just hit play. The recursion has begun.